Absolutely gorgeous day in Watkins Glen, just to the south of Seneca Lake, the Finger Lakes area of New York. Welcome to Lamborghini Super Trofeo, round 2 of the weekend here, and race number 1 was certainly good. Be prepared for race number 2. 4 different classes of Lamborghini Super Trofeo drivers out there. Brian Till, Chris Wilner will have you all the action, and there will be plenty of it. All right, let's take a look at Watkins Glen, Finger Lakes area of New York, just due south basically of Buffalo. And this racetrack, been here since the late 50s, 1956, 3.5 miles, 11 corners, elevation change, high speed, low speed, you name it, you've got it right here at the Glen. Great passing opportunities in turn 1, on the way into the inner loop, and turn 8, but you can also get it done in what we call the toe of the boot, and pretty much just about any other place on the racetrack that you can get the nose of a Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo Evo 2 inside one of your competitors and get the job done. Fans on hand, they always are here at this racetrack, and it is fantastic to be here and see all the families here. It makes for great racing. Before we get to race number 2, take a look back at the highlights of race number 1. We'll get you to where we are right now. It goes back to the drop of the green in race number 1. And I can tell you right off the bat, championships changed over the weekend. What a change at the start, though. Big move there at the start by number 1 from the outside. It didn't take long for Tom Capizzi to have a problem in the power plant of that Lamborghini. Then a little push, a little shove, a little argy-bargy. The 69 and the 14, that was on the way into the pit lane. And then this problem for the 47, that would come back to haunt them because exits turn 1, left rear tire goes down after the contact with the guardrail at the inner loop. And this is the end result. That brings out a full course caution. Then the leaders come to pit road, but there were some penalties for short pit stops. The number 1 of Danny Formal had to serve that penalty, and that hands the win to the number 29, the first of the season for Elias De La Torre and Will Bamber. Big time celebrations there. They qualified on pole for both races here this weekend and have taken the victory in race number 1. Chris, are you ready?
Brian, I am absolutely ready. You just went through that highlight package, and it just reminded me of some of the absolute chaos we experienced yesterday, both on the racetrack with some really good racing, hard racing by all of our Super Trofeo North American drivers, but also just the chaos of pit lane. And you and I know talked earlier today just how difficult and just how critical pit lane is here to make those minimum pit stop times. And obviously with some of the strategy as well, whether you're a 2-driver lineup team or a single-driver lineup team, and it caught several by surprise yesterday, and including our overall, what could have been the overall winner in our championship, or championship points leader as well, with Danny Formal and Hampus Erickson. So what will we see today? Only time will tell, with 50 minutes of action scheduled here at Watkins Glen. And how about this, Brian? Our race winners yesterday starting right where they finished yesterday on the pole.
Yeah, 4 different classes in Lamborghini Super Trofeo as well. And you've got a Pro category, Pro-Am category, then the Am category, and then LB Cup. And as we always say, you can tell the different cars that are out there. They're all the same Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo Evo 2. But look for that telltale triangle on the windscreen, and that will give you an idea of the class. The orange is the Pro category. The green is the Am category. The yellow is Pro-Am. And blue is LB Cup for the least experienced drivers out there. Big changes in championships yesterday, and it has tightened things up. There are only 3 points separate the top 3 in Pro after the race yesterday, and only 3 points separate the top 3 in Pro-Am as well. So a lot of late pit stop penalties yesterday really mixed things up, brought leaders to pit road, and that changed the entire complexion of some of these championships.
Absolutely, Brian. And then the ones that had to settle those penalties on pit road and unfortunately have solid finishes go away are going to be the ones that are looking for redemption here today, because with this being the halfway point of the 2025 season, every point is critical, from qualifying and of course your finishing position in the race. So we'll have to see if some of those teams and drivers can be on the rebound today, because they will have their work cut out for them to leave Watkins Glen in a better position than maybe where they ended up yesterday.
one official pace lap. So this second pace lap, the clock, the 50-minute clock for this event has started when the leader goes across the start-finish line. And that's just to make sure that these teams and drivers have an opportunity to get those Hankook tires up to temperature and pressure before we go green. And it is a brand new tire this weekend, Chris. It's a new iteration of the Hankook that they had been running called the L63H. Supposed to be a little more robust without losing any of the performance, and that's exactly what you want out of a tire when you come to a high energy racetrack like Watkins Glen. High speed corners, big time G loads. You want a tire that's gonna give you speed, obviously, but you want the durability.
Absolutely, and I think so far after race one, everyone's very happy with what Hankook has provided with this L63H. I mean, obviously, when you look at this racetrack too, and this tire, really dramatic improvement, especially when it comes to the rear tires. They're more compliant with better grip, and it's required teams to kind of start from scratch on their setups. And the ones that have been in it at the advantage have been the drivers and the teams like TR3 Racing that took part in the test several weeks ago, and it had showed in qualifying, and of course yesterday with that 29 winning overall in the pro class, kind of picking up where they left off. So some of the teams like Wayne Taylor Racing lacked in terms of that testing here before we showed up to Watkins Glen, and Brian, it showed in qualifying, but I feel like with every race now we're starting to get a good data sense of what these tires do over the course of a stint and kind of what they do over the course of the race. It's going to help these teams out.
We're talking about changes in the championship and big changes in pro, where Danny Vermael and Hampus Eriksson, after that penalty, fell from the lead in the championship to third. Nick Persing moves from second to first. And with the win, Elias De La Torre and Will Bamber move into second. That's just how tight the championship is. You cannot afford to have a bad day. And our leaders in pro certainly had a bad day after having to serve that penalty yesterday. And really kind of the same thing can be said for Pro-Am, as Darius Strinka and Tadas Karlinskas, who were leading in that championship, had a bad day. So did Anthony McIntosh and Brendan Leach in second. And that has catapulted Conrad Geese and Jason Hart from fourth coming into the weekend, Chris, to the lead in the championship in Pro-Am.
Yeah, it's incredible, Brian, the point swings that we saw yesterday, and you know for a fact that that's not only going to be the biggest change that we see over the course of the season, because every race is so critical from here on out, and the points championships being so tight, I wouldn't be surprised if after 50 minutes, or make that 47 minutes now after today, we'll see even more swings. But excited to get going racing with 37 Lamborghini Huracan Evo Super Trofeo 2s getting ready to go.
Lamborghini Urus safety car to pit lane, and on pole, Elias De La Torre aboard the 29, the kind of fluorescent yellow and black Huracan there. Drivers right, screen left, green flag flies, racing at Watkins Glen. Maintain your column past the start line and let's go racing. And I'll tell you what, great start for De La Torre, and Hampus Eriksson in the blue and black #1 slips back a little bit into the clutches of Nick Persing, his teammate, in the #8 as they head to the S's.
Nick Persing to driver's right is going to have to back out of it. You cannot stay too wide for very long up the hill through the S's as everyone begins to fan out deeper in the field with some of our AM and LB Cup drivers. And then the draft comes into play here as you see the battle almost 3 wide into the bus stop. This is going to get tight. Everyone settles down just for a minute, maybe a slight bit of contact. There's the Flying Lizard Motorsports Pro-Am car that's trying to knife its way through, the pink with the dragon on the side of it as we get things settled out. But Brian, we saw it yesterday, starts and restarts super critical here at Watkins Glen.
Super critical, and I think for the drivers who are willing to take just a little bit of chance before they know that they've got those tires up to temperature, you can pick up a position. They are hard to come by, so you got to grab it when you can. And there's that big time loose coming through the second left-hander there. I believe that is the 22 who had that moment, and it's kind of a heart-stopping deal if you're behind the wheel. Scott Huffaker and Jaden Conright share that 22.
And problems on the racetrack, one of the AM cars, that's Dean Nellis in the 70, that has made some pretty significant contact there, Brian, with the left side of the race car. You see the left rear, left front damage as well, the side mirror, and that is a pretty good bit of contact. And then more trouble a little bit farther up in the field. The 44 getting looped around and into the wall, and the 44 in the Pro-Am class, that's Seth Henry.
And you got to
So
wonder.
a couple incidents, Brian.
Yeah, you got to wonder if the 44 might have been involved in the 70. They weren't really close to each other on the grid, I don't believe, but obviously they both had a problem. I don't know if it was as a result of contact between those two, but like I said, they really weren't close to each other on the grid. This is going to bring out full course caution, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. There is debris littered all across that section of the racetrack. As you can see, the 70 trying to get moving forward of Dean Ellis with TR3 Racing. Tried to creep it a little bit, Brian, but I can't imagine the drivetrain is working properly aboard that Lamborghini. As we take a look back at what happened. Here's what happened to Dean.
There's contact. You
For
saw
sure.
tire
That is
smoke
a
as they
big
came
impact.
off the corner.
360 spin for Dean, and then everyone coming through, and
yeah.
there you go.
So there's the 44. That's how the 44 got damaged and then got down to the next corner and something broke. There it is as he goes in. He clips the 70 as they go by, and I was looking at the 70, and I'm trying to figure out who that was there with him as they were coming out of the toe of the boot, but it looked like there was side-by-side contact. You could see a little tire smoke, and then he hooked right and made that hard contact with the wall.
Mark Brumman going for a spin as well in the 52. He actually sits currently on the pit lane and will get refired as they attend to the 44 that, again, was part of that incident triggered by the Dean Ellis spin and into the wall. That's Seth Henry behind the wheel as the AMR safety team will help him out, and good to see him climbing out of that Lamborghini Huracan. But, man, some big impacts, Brian, especially to that 70. That way that it whipped around in like a 360 spin. It's a tricky part of the race course, and certainly this will take a little bit of time to get this mangled race car off the racetrack.
I'm wondering if that was Nick Grote that the side-to-side contact was with. Take a look. Grote is in a red and black number 57. You see the tire smoke right there, and then here comes the car as it goes by. Could have been because they were side by side on the grid, so they would have been close together on the racetrack, but you just saw a little telltale puff of smoke. That's two cars getting together side by side, and then that's what sends the 70 over. 44 makes contact with him, gets up to the heel of the boot, applies the brakes, and the car hooks right, and he's in the fence.
You can even see, Brian, the front of the 44 after he made that right front contact. Just the front end would not steer, and then something gave way as far as the axle is concerned, or something in there in the steering column. So fortunately, both drivers okay, but man, you could see the frustration for Seth Henry. So much promise in such a pretty unique looking Lamborghini livery on that car for Kaizen Autosport. And the 44 had kind of a little bit of a difficult start to the weekend. I know they were battling some gremlins as a new team early. They crashed a brand new car at Sebring within the first few laps of the first practice session, kind of put them behind the 8 ball, and had to repair the original car for Watkins Glen. So it's been a yeoman's work for that team, and now they just got more work to do on that 44.
Well, and there's a look at the 52 of Mark Brumman, winner yesterday in the LB Cup category. He's had a problem early on as well, so he's back underway, and the car looks undamaged, but take a look at the very top of the screen. He may have had a little contact with the car just in front of him, or had to check up on the brakes on the way in, pin the nose, and around he goes. So you go from having the win yesterday to having a problem early on. The good thing about having a problem early on is it leaves you more time to make up for it. But Brumman had been remarkably consistent throughout the first 3 races on the podium every weekend. Then a problem in round 2 at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, but answers back with the win yesterday. Second in the championship, actually tied for first with Nick Grote. Both of them have 54 points. So one of those deals where Grote has more victories, but has had a couple of bad finishes. And for Brumman, he got his first win yesterday. If it were to end like this, it goes with who has the most wins. So they're tied for first right now, but that's just how tight these championships are. I said tied in LB Cup, only 3 points separate the top 3 in both Pro and Pro-Am. Really, the Am Championship is the only one that you might have a comfortable lead, as Glenn McGee and Graham Doyle have 4 wins on the season, and right now have a 14-point lead over David Staub, who's in second.
Yeah, absolutely, and that will continue to fluctuate here as we kind of settle this race down, and then of course we continue on with the championship. Next stop after Watkins Glen is Road America in the beginning of August, so we still have a couple of North American rounds here in the States, but like you mentioned, the championships being so tight, we're not accustomed to seeing that. We're accustomed to seeing it pretty much each and every year in the 13 seasons of North American Championship, but I feel like this weekend has just thrown a wrench in things, especially with the way yesterday played out and of course the way today is starting. So we'll get back going under green and let the drivers duke it out, but certainly this has been an action-packed weekend and these fans here are loving it.
They are loving it. Top of the grandstands there and enjoying a beautiful day. Maybe an adult beverage or two. Good families time around, sitting in the grandstands, in the camping grounds, you name it. Fans around the fences watching Lamborghini Super Trofeo here at Watkins Glen. Got a Ricky Bobby fan there. It could be an adult beverage in his hand too, I think, Chris.
I would think so. These fans have been here all weekend, some pouring in on Tuesday even earlier this week to be a part of this action-packed weekend, taking all the sights and sounds of one of the most iconic racetracks in North America in such a picturesque setting, Brian, with the Finger Lakes in the background. Of course, Seneca Lake we can see from all the way to the top of the broadcast booth, and the hills, the wineries that surround this area. This month, especially kind of the beginning of summer, is such a special time in this part of the country.
Hey guys, enjoying the day there. Like I said, good family time. And the great thing about Watkins Glen, you've got grandstands that you can sit on, but really a lot of the enjoyment of taking in this racetrack is just cruising around on the infield and spending a few minutes at different stops along the way and enjoying the sights and the sounds around the racetrack. These guys, they meant business when they came here. These guys had a plan. Look at that.
Yeah, that's not a rookie move. That is a veteran move right there as far as their setup is concerned. And they definitely have been here a time or two, or to a racetrack at least, to camp out for the weekend. So what a scene here. The weather's been great, Brian. I tell you what, we are expecting some really hot temperatures tomorrow, but for today and these Lamborghini Super Trofeo North American drivers, they're certainly welcoming a little bit cooler of a day. Still in the mid-70s. I think temperatures today topped around 80 or just in the low 80s. So it's still warm this time of year, but certainly could be a lot hotter.
Certainly could. You saw that beautiful shot of Seneca Lake just a moment ago. As I said, Watkins Glen, the village of Watkins Glen, just at the base of Seneca Lake. Hey guys, group of fans in the stands enjoying Lamborghini Super Trofeo. Hopefully we'll get back to green pretty soon, but there's a big mess to clean up there coming out of the toe of the boot with the 70 and the 44 involved. Newell's got the worst of it with the big impact after making contact with another car. That sent him to the right and into the wall. There will be some wall repair there as well, Chris. It didn't look like the tires were askew per se, but that big belting that they put around the tires that has really kind of come into play over the last 5 or 10 years has kept those tire bundles together and allowed the energy of an impact to be spread amongst the tire walls. The wall doesn't just blow apart like we used to see. And they're going to have to get that banding back attached to the tires, so that may take a little bit as well. And then we had the 44, who was kind of an innocent victim of that as he came by and clipped the 70 that was there. A lot of bits and pieces to clean up and a lot of carbon fiber to get off the racetrack there before we get back to green.
Yeah, you can see the safety trucks blowing a lot of that debris off. Of course, the trips through the grass for a lot of the competitors that had to scatter to avoid hitting either of those race cars, in particular the 70. So hope to get back under green soon, but you mentioned kind of the safety precautions with those tire bundles. I can think back to, a decade or so ago, even when NASCAR was here, some of the impacts in that section of the racetrack. Certainly it's a welcome sign to see kind of the way that those tire bundles do their job and dissipate the energy, because it does not feel good to crash a car in any way, but for certain that takes some of the energy off the driver and dissipates that away, so that's good to see.
Yeah, good to see the safety teams out there immediately. AMR safety team always on the scene. A lot of times it almost seems before the car has stopped. They're there, and then the Watkins Glen crew does such a great job of getting out there, getting the materials on site, getting the walls back repaired. They have that banding back in place, so hopefully we'll get back to racing relatively soon. 50-minute sprint race here in Lamborghini Super Trofeo. That does not mean that a pit stop does not come into play. There's one of the AMR rapid response vehicles with medical response, and like I said, they always do such a great job, but pit stops do come into play in Lamborghini Super Trofeo. There is a mandatory pit stop. That pit stop window will be moved since we're under full course caution, but in a 2-driver format, you're going to be in the pit lane for a minimum of 120 seconds. A single driver format is going to be 123 seconds. You get that extra 3 seconds that you have to spend there, because if you're a single driver, you know the car, you know the tires, you know the racetrack when you came in. You're going to have an advantage when you go back out, so you're going to spend a little bit more time on pit road. And what we've seen over the years is that really equals out very well.
It does, but we saw yesterday a couple of different strategies as far as when to complete that pit stop. The driver that pretty much dominated, or the team that dominated much of the day before that pit time penalty, the Wayne Taylor Racing number 10 in the pro class. Remember, Danny Formal stayed out longer than pretty much anyone else, was able to get that large enough gap to where then when they came down pit lane to do that mandatory pit stop and spend that extra couple of seconds on pit lane, they still had a gap when they came out back onto the racetrack. So we'll see if anybody takes that card and uses that play as far as the pit strategy. But you're right, with this full course yellow and almost kind of a slow start to this sprint race, it'll be interesting to see when the pit window gets moved back how many takers we get right off the bat.
You got to play the strategy and try to figure out, do you want to, as you were just saying, if I've got a driver in the car who's turning really fast laps right now and they don't have traffic, it could be advantageous to leave them out and see if they can increase some distance between themselves and their nearest competitor. The other thing you've got to be so conscious of is the overlap of classes. Who are you racing with? The battle that I'm having right now, wheel to wheel with this other driver, does it matter? Are they in my class? Is it worth risking my car in this position for a position that doesn't really matter because he's not in my class? You only get points for the order within your class, and going wheel to wheel and risking it all when you're up against another driver who's not in your class doesn't make a lot of sense. What does make sense is we're about to go back to green. Lights out on the Lamborghini Urus safety car. They will be coming to pit lane. We'll be back to green.
Field's going to work its way through the boot portion of the racetrack as they work toward the heel now off of turn number 9, headed toward 10, and some of the grandstands down there with a good-looking crowd ready to welcome the field back as we get set to go back under the green flag. And we'll see the level of aggression. We saw a couple of outside passes yesterday, Brian, down into the braking zone at turn number 1. One of those drivers, Hampus Eriksson, sitting in the catbird seat in second, with Elias De La Torre going to lead the field back to green.
E4, as he calls himself, Elias De La Torre on pole right now, leading this pack. He started the race on pole after qualifying 2, and he picks up the pace. What is going on with the number 1? It's like he didn't go, and De La Torre is long gone, and it seems like Hampus Eriksson really laying back or had some type of mechanical problem. The car would just not accelerate, and no one would go by him because the green flag was not out yet.
And Brian, he is coming to a slow stop, and make that actually now starts to get going at the start-finish line. It's almost like the car wasn't in gear, and he was trying to get it going. So Hampus Eriksson just plummeted through the running order, finally gets going, but the rest of the field already out of the S's and down the backstretch toward the inner loop. So Nick Persing taking over second, Kiko Porto in that 3rd spot, and then it's chaos behind as you see one of the Flying Lizard Motorsports, I believe that's Mark Miller, a Pro-Am car here in the inner loop, mixing it up with some of the pro drivers. Yeah,
not at all surprised to see Mark Miller up there. Very, very talented professional race car driver, and when he gets the opportunity to start, he is going to be impressive. He is. We also saw the 94 Steven Sabaro in the pit lane and behind the wall, but look at the gap now that De La Torre has back to Persing because of the mechanical issues we surmise for Hampus Eriksson coming to the start.
almost 5 seconds, Brian, is what costed Nick Persing and the rest of the field after the issues with Hampus Erickson. So Elias De La Torre has a lot of breathing room here as they negotiate turn number 8. As you take a little bit look farther back, the 77 under attack. That's Jake Walker, again subbing this week for Keenan Tandon, who normally runs that 47 Motorsports Lamborghini. So Walker trying to hold off a couple of drivers behind him, including Jaden Conrad, who did double duty today, running the Michelin Pilot Challenge race, and Colin Queen running in that 4-car.
Well, pit window is now open. Elias De La Torre does not take it, but the pit window is open, and I see a couple of cars dive to pit lane, but we also know there are going to be a couple of cars that have penalties for a false start on the original green flag. That is the 28, the 81, and the 68. So those 3 cars are going to have a drive-through penalty for a false start. Luke Berkeley behind the wheel of the 28, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And just looking down pit road, Kiko Porto, some of the drivers kind of in the mid-pack of the pro class. Kiko Porto down pit lane, as well as the Colin Queen machine. We were just talking about him. Hampus Erickson made it onto pit road after that issue on the restart. So kind of the early batch here. Most of the back markers of the pro cars. We have a couple LB Cup machines as well, with several on pit lane, including some AM category drivers and Clay Wilson. So this opportunity here, as you see Hampus getting out of the race car, Danny Formal going to climb in, kind of scratching their heads on maybe what happened, but clearly the crew not looking into the car as maybe detailed as we would think, and they're just going to buckle Danny in and send him on his way.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he was perhaps in the wrong gear or what have you. The 68 on pit lane was Kiko Porto, perhaps serving the penalty, the drive-through penalty for the false start. The 28, Luke Berkeley, and the 81, Tyler Gonzalez. And those are experienced drivers, so it's kind of interesting to see that they got caught out on that false start. Obviously, Kiko Porto is very experienced in the IMSA paddock. He leads the GSX category in VP Racing Sports Car Challenge, so he knows how to start. Look at the gap between De La Torre and Persing now, 5.5 seconds. The last time by, what is it this time? I think it may even be more than that. We'll wait for Persing to cross the line. It is. It's now up to 6 seconds. De La Torre is absolutely flying, and that problem for Hampus Erickson was a problem for the rest of the field.
It certainly was, as that gap continues to grow. Persing in the 2nd spot, Jaden Conrad in 3rd, Luke Berkeley in that 4th position. Luke and that team started deep in the field, working their way up to that 4th spot. But again, as you mentioned, that costly restart may have caught some of those drivers that had those restart penalties just off guard because of the stack up with the rest of the field. But you saw the Wayne Taylor Racing team sending Danny Formal back onto the racetrack. As we check now, the battle going to be now for 2nd. That's Jaden Conrad. There's the gap between 1st. De La Torre setting his sails in the wind. Then it's a while back to Nick Persing and Jaden Conrad, who's now just about 2 seconds out of that battle for 2nd. So things stretching out at the front of the field, and that was a welcome gift for Elias De La Torre.
Absolutely it was, and you look back just behind to the 4th place car. You saw Persing, and then the 3rd place car in the pro category is Jaden Conrad, a little bit further back in the order, and that is that orange and black number 22. So tell you what, interesting stuff here at the start. And as a driver coming to that restart, you got into the acceleration zone, and Elias De La Torre did exactly what he needed to do. He got into the restart zone and he accelerated. When Hampus Erickson didn't, no one behind him could pass him. The green flag had not been displayed yet, so they couldn't begin to pass him. They didn't know if he was just lagging back or if he had a mechanical problem. You're kind of in no man's land, and the chances are the officials would have let it slide since there was some type of an obvious issue with the number 1. But you don't want to take that risk, right, Chris? So you sit there, and when you do, you end up paying the price for it to the tune of about now 6.8 seconds between De La Torre and Persing.
Yeah, you mentioned it, no man's land, and having driven not these cars, but just racing in general, when it comes to restarts, you have to really be careful, whether it's lining up side by side or, of course, like you mentioned, not passing until the green flag is unfurled, and you're anxious, your foot's on the throttle, you're on the brake, you're trying to figure out, does the car have the problem or not? And so certainly it just creates just a convoluted problems for the rest of the field. So we'll see if anybody can rebound or slow down or catch back up to Elias De La Torre. But again, the blistering pace he is setting right now, continuing to put down really quick laps. Fastest car on the racetrack that last lap with a 1:48.268. So he's still rolling here as continues just to try to build as big of a gap as he can.
Well, I think he's doing exactly the right thing. He's got clear sailing, so keep building that gap. Problems on the pit stop for the 48, David Staub. Pit lane speed violation. That will be a drive-through penalty for him. We saw a lot of pit violations yesterday, both speed and short pit stops. And you got to think about that short pit stop. You've got a timer on your dash, you know when to release, you know when to go, and if you make it short and you're just a second short, well, guess what? You're going to do a drive-through, and a drive-through is worth 30-something seconds. Look at this battle, side by side. I believe that's Tom Capizzi there to the left in the purple entry, and then the 47, and that is two different classes of cars, and that's one of the things that we were just talking about of you got to be careful with who you're racing with. Brian Ortiz and Dominic Starkweather share the 47, but for Capizzi, he needs to know that, hey, Brian Ortiz behind the wheel of the 47 right now is not in my class. Let's not bang wheels with somebody that I'm not doing battle with.
And remember, both of those cars had issues yesterday, so we take a look back down pit lane, and the race leader is in. Elias De La Torre is out, and Will Bamber, who scored his first career pole yesterday in qualifying before race one, was on the pole for race one. He is climbing in to take that car home. So will the gap be big enough? I certainly think so. We'll see what the difference is once the cycle completes and where that 29 re-enters the racetrack. But certainly you don't have to pressure the team or the driver change when you have a almost 7-second lead, Brian, into the pit lane.
So as pit stops take place, the order will kind of get mixed up because we've got cars out on the racetrack who have not pitted yet and cars that are just cycling back in. So it'll take a few minutes to get this sorted out and figure out exactly who's leading in what class. Meanwhile, little argy-bargy on the racetrack, if you want to call it that, a little while ago before the pit stops were taking place. I believe the 6-6 was involved with that. And we will take a look here. There you go. There's the 45. The 66 and the 46. I think the 66 of Tasca there in the middle is trying to avoid the car that's on the outside. He squeezes down into the 46. They make contact. They got hooked up there for a moment.
They did, and even some body parts flying off one of the race cars there as pit lane continues to be busy. You see the pro class leader at the time, who was Elias De La Torre, climbed out. Will Bamber now re-entering the racetrack. So here's where the blend line is as we take a look at the 41, who will scream through turns number 1 and 2. That's Mark Miller in Pro-Am. So again, interclass mixing up here during the pit cycle. Have to know who you're racing with as Will Bamber gets up to speed. And it looks like, according to timing and scoring, will slot into that second spot. And the gap, Brian, just about the same. But again, Nick Persing has to come down pit road.
And Mark Miller will hand that 41 entry, Flying Lizard entry off to Paul Nimshoff, his teammate. So, and Nimshoff, a really, really interesting guy. Won his first Lamborghini Super Trofeo race at the World Finals last year. What a place to win your first race, right? And a really cool guy, does a lot of traveling. Just returned from the Galapagos Islands just before WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca event. So kind of a world traveler and a pretty good race car driver to boot. So all kinds of interesting characters out here in Lamborghini Super Trofeo, and I think that's what makes the 4 different classes so interesting.
Interesting indeed. As we take a look back here, some battling going on in the field. Again, inter-class battles between a couple of different cars. The 46 making its way into that technical section of the boot as we continue to march forward here, approaching 20 minutes to go in race number 2 and the final race of the weekend here at Watkins Glen for Lamborghini Super Trofeo. And this is the kind of time you set yourself up, Brian, for the end of the race. You've made your pit stop. If you're a 2-driver lineup, the second driver is now getting accustomed to what the race car has, what you can do with it, and now it's trying to capitalize on every position possible for here into the finish.
Pit window is winding down, so you need to make sure you've gotten in before it closes. Otherwise, it's going to be a big problem. So that closes down. Have you gotten in? Have you done what you needed to do? Did you get that driver change done? Pit window is now closed.
And the last cars, Brian, on pit lane when the window closed were the 2 Pro-Am leaders, Mark Miller and Andy Lee. Mark Miller in the 41 had the lead in the class. They pitted as well as Andy Lee, so Slade Stewart to climb aboard the Flying Lizard, that pink number 14. And then the 41 also on pit lane, as I mentioned, we're leading the racing class. So Paul Nemshoff, as you mentioned, will now take over the finishing duties. So those are the final 2 cars to complete that pit window cycle. And we'll see what that does to the Pro-Am class here this afternoon.
Teammates, and you've got to think about that Pro-Am championship, the 14 and the 41. So it's one of those deals where Andy Lee and Slade Stewart, remember, they won first round at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, but got 0 points in both of the Sebring rounds because of a huge crash that Slade Stewart had in qualifying. They were not able to make either one of those starts, so they started well back in points when the car got on track at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. They're up to 5th now, and in reality in the championship, they're only 8 points out of the championship lead. So pretty impressive stuff. Big, impressive comeback by that group, fueled in part by some really bad finishes for the top 3 in the championship over the last couple of rounds. So that's what has closed that championship down, and Andy Lee and Slade Stewart far from being out of the championship. Mark Miller and Paul Nemshoff, they're 3rd in the championship right now, and only a few points out of the lead. In fact, 3 points out of the championship lead. And so Miller doing a great job staying out as long as he possibly could, creating the largest gap that he could before he handed that car over to Paul Nemshoff.
And both of those cars really at Laguna Seca were starting to make the biggest grounds. I mean, you look at Andy Lee, Slade Stewart winning in race number 1 at Laguna Seca. Their teammates also having podiums over that weekend. Then moving into this weekend, of course, yesterday in that Pro-Am class with Andy Lee and Slade Stewart getting on the podium in that 3rd position. So racking up those points, and Brian, with everything we've seen this weekend, that could be the difference. If you could just consistently find yourself on the podium, you never know what's going to happen. And like you mentioned, they have climbed their way into this championship hunt.
Well, and you're talking about consistently being there, and that's really the biggest problem for Danny Vermael and Hampus Eriksson right now. After that problem on the restart, Eriksson got the car to the pit lane, but they are well back in the order. They're 7th right now in the pro category. And you look at the championship, this is brutal because Nick Persing, who is 2nd in the championship, is having a much, much better day of it, and that's going to allow him to continue to extend that championship. And then you look at the 29 of Bamber and De La Torre, who were 2nd in the championship coming into today's race. They're leading right now. This thing is going to get all turned upside down as we leave Watkins Glen. It's going to be super interesting to see how this plays out, and we will be at the halfway point when we leave Watkins Glen. 3 more race weekends to go to decide the championship, but wow, this weekend here at Watkins Glen has really mixed things up.
It has a little argy-bargy here down into and a little bit of a wave, a salute. Not sure if that is going to be more of a friendly salute. The 28 of Ernie Francis behind the wheel in the pro class, giving the salute to the 45 who runs in the Pro-Am category. And behind the wheel of that car, I believe, is Gabriel Hogan. Those 2 cars running there, but yeah, no love lost between those 2, Brian.
I don't know. He may have just been waving, saying, thanks for letting me by. I'm going with that, Chris.
I'll stick with that, Brian. I'll give the drivers the benefit of the doubt here.
Give Ernie the benefit of the doubt. That's right. Good battles all around this racetrack, but as they come by, make sure you look for that colored triangle on the windscreen, or what I call the chiclet on the rear bumper, and a little bump there on the way in to the inner loop. You saw the 88 trying to look to the inside, trying to pick up a position. That was Jackson Lee. He thought he was there, and the door just got closed, and a little bit of contact across the nose of the 88.
Yeah, I haven't talked much about Jackson Lee this weekend, but he's a guy who's having to get used to having different co-drivers every weekend. I mean, I'm pretty sure Mo Daka is his third different co-driver of the season in 3 different weekends. So as we take a look at Rocky Bolduc, who continues to pace here first in LB Cup, what a weekend for Jackson Lee and trying to get that car back up. But Rocky's been solid, Brian, this weekend. Yesterday doing a solid performance as he continues to build his resume and doing a nice job in this LB Cup class that continues to be almost wide open, because after the issues with Tom Capizzi yesterday, another class that has the points shaking things up here with Rocky leading the charge for Rafa Racing.
Yeah, when you look at Rocky right now and you look at the championship, the 2 drivers in front of him in the championship, one of those is Mark Brumman. Well, Brumman 3 positions back from Rocky right now, and then the other one who is leading the championship is Nick Grote. And for Grote, he is even further back, 67 now with an issue.
Jason Hart losing it in turn 1 will gather it back up. A dangerous spot to try to re-enter the racetrack with a full field of cars barreling down on you, but he's able to get away. Jason was running back, I believe, in the 5th spot in the Pro-Am class at the time of the spin, so not sure how much time he may have lost, although he will certainly be under attack here as they battle into the bus stop. Here's a look at what happened to Jason.
Oh, yeah. He gets in there. He's got the 2 cars in front of him. I think he has to check up at exactly the wrong place. He's really closing in as they head to the apex, Chris, and I think he has to maybe even touch the brakes to keep from making contact, and it really pins the nose and around it goes. You don't see Jason Hart spin very often. Good job of staying out of the cars in front of him. Remember, after yesterday, he and his teammate Conrad Geese are leading in the Pro-Am Drivers' Championship, so that spin was costly. I said things were mixed up. I think in all the different classes, it seems like the championship's been thrown into a blender, everything except the AM class. The other 3 are crazy this weekend. There have been movement up and down.
How about this battle? LB Cup on AM, the 46 of Sebastian Carrazzo in the AM class getting around the 49 of Tom Capizzi in the LB Cup division, and Tom's not done, having to fend off a couple more cars in Pro-Am. Colby Shield trying to get his way through, actually make that the 88 of Jackson Lee, and Lee will squeak by. So again, Brian, have to know who you're racing and what position it's for. It's hard to do when you're in the midst of battle.
Well, the thing that's crazy is all 4 classes were right there as they came back on to the old circuit. So you could tell by that color, once again, that color triangle up in the right-hand corner of the windscreen. And that's where some of these drivers, the faster driver, has gotten in on the pit stop, and he's working through the field, and he's going through either some slower class cars or the same class that has the slower driver in it now. So there's a lot of give and take, and sometimes there's not nearly as much give as there should be and a lot more take than there should be.
Certainly not, as Slade Stewart there in the pink car, your leader in class, car number 14, the Pro-Am division. And then more hot and heavy battles back there, a little bit deeper. The 47 is making a little bit more of a charge after the problems yesterday. Remember what happened to Dominic Starkweather? Brian Ortiz now behind the wheel.
Way outside track limits in turn 8. So we'll have to see if there'll be a warning given for that. I'm sure there is. There's the 14. Flying Lizard entry. Slade Stewart behind the wheel, leading in Pro-Am. Great job. Slade Stewart's one of these drivers who not only has such a great personality, but has come a long way over the last couple of years in his driving. won a championship, moved up to Pro-Am with Andy Lee. Talked about them winning a race earlier in the year, that first round at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, and then 2 podiums following that, and in a position to win here if Slade Stewart can hold down the point in Pro-Am for the next 10.5 minutes.
Absolutely, it's been a really remarkable journey for Slade Stewart, and then the driver behind them also doing a nice job of Graham Doyle continuing the charge in the AM class for Wayne Taylor Racing. As, contact here into turn 11, gets the 35, I believe, out of shape and almost up the hill, so that's LB Cup on AM.
That was Ernie Francis there coming through in the 28, made that side-by-side contact with the 63.
Ernie's had a day.
Yeah, he has. He's trying to work his way to the front and just makes the contact there. I think he believes there's a little more room to the left side of the road than there actually is, and gets into the left side of the 63, I believe it was. And Francis is through, and no harm, no foul, but certainly made his mark as he went by, literally on the side of the other car.
Worth noting, Clay Wilson and LB Cup had to serve a drive-through for minimum pit stop time penalties, so we did have one, at least one I saw. Not as many as we saw yesterday, Brian, in the final 5 minutes of that exciting race that changed the complexion of the finishing order. So everyone being mindful of that as we work down under 10 minutes, so just about 9 minutes left to go, and everyone racing with their might to the finish of this one here as we take a look at the 67 continuing to work his way 5th right now on the Pro-Am sheet. And that's Jason Hart, as we mentioned, who had the loop earlier. Stayed 5th in class, Brian, so didn't lose any positions, but has to crack the whip because he's got Danny Formal in that one machine right behind.
Well, yeah, and remember, again, the different classes. Formal is not in position, and if he presses me too hard, I'm going to let him go so I can follow him and focus forward, try to put good laps in. I'm not going to slow my pace down to let him go by, but if he's there, I'll let him by. I'm not going to fight him too hard. I don't want to hold myself up. I need to move forward, like you were saying. Time closing down on 8 minutes to go here. So for Jason Hart, he wants to move forward. He's got a couple of more cars in front of him that he needs to get if he wants to continue to solidify the lead of the championship right now.
More action a little bit deeper in the field with the 77 also trying to fend off some hard chargers on the racetrack. It's back in Pro with Al Morey behind the wheel of that machine, and Al doing a nice job, Brian, in that 77, sitting 3rd in class, trying to make his way around the 4 of Enzo Geraci. Actually just did, so moved Geraci back a spot, or moved Geraci up a spot, I should say, as this battle is not going away either, with Brian Ortiz trying to run away from, look at that, you got Pro-Am, and LB Cup all together.
Yeah, and if you think about it, once again, Slade Stewart, being smart, is going to say, hey, I'm not going to fight with you. I'm going to let the 47 on through. I got no bone to pick with you, Brian Ortiz. So he goes through, and then really just behind him now is the 10, Graham Doyle, who leads in the AM category. He doesn't care about him either. His nearest competitor for Slade Stewart is 4 cars back in the 30. That car in the hand of Nicky Hayes, who was very impressive yesterday. But for Slade Stewart, let these guys through as quickly and as tidily as you can so that you don't lose much time, so that you can maintain that lead over Nicky Hayes.
And that was smart by Graham Doyle. Gave plenty of room to drivers right, and Slade just absolutely let him go. So Graham Doyle, who already, that team with he and Glenn McGee, as you mentioned earlier, Brian, 4 wins on the season, including yesterday, continuing to just put the stranglehold on this AM class in 2025. As Slade continues.
Yeah, down to the laces of the boot. What I'm looking at, Chris, is you look from Stewart back and you're looking for a red and burgundy number 30. That would be his nearest competitor in class. That would be Nicky Hayes. Has good fights everywhere. That's the 77 and the 8 now. Nick Persing aboard the 8. Morey aboard the 77. These two have been going at it for the last several laps.
They have, for sure, and it's been aggressive with Persing, who again is in that championship fight in the pro class. Maury doing a nice job in the 77. Again, battle for a podium here. So the race leader may be gone by almost 11 seconds, but every spot on the podium here, a little outside, inside-outside look from Persing, trying to find the run off of turn 11. Will he make a move as he tries to break the draft? Maury does on Nick Persing down the front straightaway, all the way to driver's right. Forces the long way around for Nick Persing. Will it work? Not this time, but that's good stuff.
Can he get the over-under Persing? I think he needs to play that just a little bit sooner, get back to the left, get the line taken on the outside, and then try to get the big over-under. Problem for the 65. Rolls back, light contact with the wall, but now back underway. Shahi with the problem there at the exit of the toe of the boot, and kind of looks like no harm, no foul. Let's see if we can see what happens. Turn in, and then just behind him is the 68. Now he just gets up wide into the gray and loses the rear end of that Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo Evo 2. 620 plus horsepower, 570 Newton meters of torque. So there's plenty of get up and go in the back of this Lamborghini, and they do have traction control. It's a 9-position traction control, but it's not stability control. So once you spin those rear tires, the braking system isn't going to come on and try to help you right the car. You're going to have to do it yourself. It's not stability control. It just keeps the rear tires from spinning. It looks like he gets out there on the gray, ask a little bit too much from the loud pedal, and around it goes. But tell you, the car flying right now is Earl Bamberg, almost 11 seconds over Scott Heffaker aboard the number 22. And this could be a picture-perfect weekend for Bamber and Elias De La Torre in TR3 Racing. 2 poles, and they're working on win number 2. This battle continues.
That's the 12 of Anthony Bullock in the AMP class. Nope, does not matter as he continues to try to fight his way through. But you're right, Brian, there's Slade Stewart trying to hang on. Yeah, but it's the car right behind Slade Stewart now. I said, look for that white and burgundy number 30. That is Nicky Hayes, and he is there. Hayes now all over the rear wing, has gotten past Bullock in the 12, and now nothing separates himself from Slade Stewart. He's going to be aggressive here, Brian. Thought about it on the inside. Maybe had to check up a little bit. You got to be smart, right, Chris? For Nicky Hayes, his team's going to tell him, hey, last lap, 151.9. And they're going to tell him Slade Stewart 53.6. A problem, a fire in pit lane. I believe it's the 47. Boy, their weekend has gone bad to worse after the incident yesterday with Dominic Starkweather, not once but twice. Now the car on fire on pit lane with Brian Ortiz climbing out. Here's a look at what happened. Already Brian on fire. The back end of that race car as they pull the attention of the crew, and of course, good sign this fire extinguishers already on scene. Yeah, crew member right there with the fire extinguisher has the pin pulled. He is ready to go, but you can see almost looks like it's somewhat of a fed fire. Something is feeding it because the flames stay pretty persistent back there, and that's what's scary. You want to make sure you get the engine cycled off to kill the fuel pumps, making sure there's no fuel left, being forced through the fuel lines and things like that. Get all that supply out of the way so the fire can be extinguished. Nicky Hayes trying to extinguish Slade Stewart and take over the lead. Stewart turns in a little bit early, cuts off the inside line, and for Nicky Hayes, he needs to understand he is the faster car. You can get this done. Let's just be smart about it. But time is starting to wind out, as you see on your screen, 2 laps to go. Coming to the white, and I tell you what, Nicky Hayes is on the hammer right now in car number 30. Had to almost back off a little bit after some aggressive moves there in the boot section of the racetrack, but off of turn number 11 they come. So the white flag will wave next time by, and as you mentioned, Brian, it's patience, but also you're running out of time, and there's only a select handful of spots to make your move. Absolutely. Slade Stewart, Nicky Hayes right there. And Hayes, he's got the faster car. What can he do with it? He loses a little bit coming through turn 1. Slade Stewart got a great run, or Nicky Hayes made a little bit of a mistake. 2 to go, 2 laps, 7 miles.
Can Slade Stewart hold on? And you look about the championship implications. He really wants to keep Nikki Hayes behind him. Hayes behind him in the championship right now, but most importantly, Slade Stewart, Andy Lee, they want the maximum points to help them with that continued rise in the championship. Meanwhile, Will Bamber out of turn 9 and through turn 10, through 11 one more time. He should see the white flag this time.
He could almost coast it from here with that large lead off of turn number 11 as he'll see the white flag. And look at, here we go, battle for the lead in Pro-Am. Nikki Hayes, it's go time as they come to the white flag when they hit start finish. Hayes gonna dive to the inside. It's a late braking zone, and what a move from Nikki Hayes. Crossover attempt.
He sends it, yep, and Slade Stewart's gonna try to cross back over, cannot get the job done. I thought he might get it done a little bit, but I think he mistimed it just a little bit. Could not get the crossover move done.
That is how you textbook set up your combatant for a race-winning move, as Nikki Hayes now will pull away by a couple car lengths. They'll see the white flag this time around. Your overall leader already gone on the racetrack. This battle could shape up here in the final lap, Brian, if Slade Stewart can put a couple corners together, but then has to let one of the faster cars through, and no, that's not what you need to happen.
No, not at all.
Bullock.
Keep the engine fired, back underway. Slade Stewart is moving. It was the 12 of Anthony Bullock that made contact. I'm a little confused about the 12, and maybe it's just the light, because it looked like he has the same yellow triangle on the windscreen that Slade Stewart does, but they are in different classes. But that does not matter to this man, Will Bamber, who is finishing this lap down in turn 8. He only has 3 more corners to go, and it will be the perfect weekend for TR3, Will Bamber and Elias De La Torre.
What a job, what a weekend to catapult yourself in the championship. Remember, we go back to the test, Brian, with this new tire. What did they learn that maybe others didn't? Well, it's shown to fruition this weekend, a clean sweep of the Pro class.
Will Bamber, Elias De La Torre, TR3 Racing win at Watkins Glen and Lamborghini Super Trofeo Pro. Perfect weekend for that duo and that team. Still 3 classes to settle.
Taking a look at the AM class leader, that's Graham Doyle in cruise control. Some other Pro-Am cars around him, but he is not under attack for the race lead. And Graham Doyle, what a job for this team, this group, him and Glenn McGee continuing to flex their muscle in this AM class, going for win number 5 off the corner. Wayne Taylor Racing, Graham Doyle, Glenn McGee will win an AM.
Well, I'll tell you what, big news, that incident in turn 1 between the 12 and the 14, there's going to be a penalty for the 12, and that will be a post-race drive-through equivalent for the 12 of Anthony Bullock and One Motorsport. So we'll keep adding winners. Nikki Hayes takes the victory in Pro-Am, and where did Slade Stewart come? That contact with the 12 moves the 14 back to 4th. So Andy Lee, Slade Stewart 4th after running so well here for Flying Lizard Motorsport. They still come home with some good points, but it could have been so much better.
And the celebrations beginning for Rocky Bolduc and Rafa Racing. Again, they were 3rd yesterday in LB Cup. They claim top step today in an exciting race here at Watkins Glen to wrap up the weekend for Lamborghini Super Trofeo. Brian, dominance on one end and absolute chaos in some of the other classes.
Hey, I have to just say this, Chris. For Rocky, that is a sweet deal, and I have to say that since his family is in the maple syrup business. So Rocky takes his first victory in Lamborghini Super Trofeo of 2025, and a great job. What a great job he and that entire team have done. They've improved week in and week out. He's really focused on being better, and anytime you're working with Rafa Racing, you know you're working with some of the best, so congratulations to him for his victory.
What a job throughout the entire field here for Lamborghini Super Trofeo North America. Chaotic, exciting, but nonetheless just absolute hard racing throughout the field. And Brian, the pit lane wasn't the story today. It was the argy-bargy on the racetrack as we take a look at our finishing order.
Yeah, that first caution was a long one, and that really kind of changed the complexion of the race, but didn't change anything for Will Bamber and Elias De La Torre. Absolutely perfect weekend, like we said, for them. 2 poles, 2 wins. You look a little bit further back. We were just talking about Slade Stewart, the contact that he had there with the number 12, and that was frustrating for him. I'm sure Anthony Bullock and he got together, different class cars, so you really want to avoid contact like that, and that's going to upset the championship a little bit as you look through the rest of the unofficial results, and it's going to take some serious ciphering, so to speak, Chris, to work these championships out, because as I said earlier, it's like they've been thrown in the blender.
Absolutely. A couple pit road penalties ruining some days, and then of course the more unfortunate circumstances for Brian Ortiz and Dominic Starkweather. A crash yesterday, fire today. They'll look to regroup when we hit the next round of the championship. So Brian, I tell you what, final thoughts for me are exciting, and I cannot wait to see what more shakeups we have in the championship as this season rolls on.
Well, and think about it. Next round for Lamborghini Super Trofeo North America is Road America. That is a 4-mile ribbon of asphalt. It's America's National Park of Speed. And what a perfect place for Lamborghini Super Trofeo North America to head next. Congratulations to all of our winners today. We're at the halfway mark. That means we still have half of the season left for Lamborghini Super Trofeo North America, and I can tell you every race, every lap, every corner is going to be exciting. For Chris Wilner, I'm Brian Till. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you from Wisconsin, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, when Lamborghini Super Trofeo North America takes to the track next. So long, everyone.